Well, today we have a special evening for Intercoin to have a chat with Ryan from Mpowa. And the reason why we invited Ryan, because he got a lot of different type of communities in Africa, in different countries. And as always, Intercoin is dedicated to communities all over the world to help to raise funds, to help to create their own coins, to help for communities to connect with each other, and to Web2 companies to move into Web3. And today we're going to have a wonderful conversation about all achievements of Mpowa, what they've achieved so far, and their plans with NFTs, with different types of eco farming and different types of communities in different countries. And please, Ryan, introduce yourself to our community, and we will go from there with our questions.
Well, thanks, Elena. Lovely to be here. Thanks to the Intercoin community and Unblockers for inviting Mpowa to speak today. We've been talking for a while now. Elena, you and I have had a few meetings in London at a few events, and it's always a pleasure. So hopefully, we've got some things to say this evening that will excite people a bit. A little bit about myself. I've always been a software geek, basically, since I was young. I used to write computer games as a teenager. Then I stumbled into electronic engineering as a kind of professional qualification. I went to University of Manchester here in England, and I learned some things there about let's say physics and quantum physics and interesting subjects that would sort of later be part of what distilled, what sort of inspired me to start Mpowa. Coming out of university, I went into banking and spent 20 odd years developing software systems in the financial services sector. A lot of big organizations, large banks, insurance companies, and the like. And let's say on the course of that journey, I became disillusioned and frustrated, and increasingly angry about some of the behavior and conduct I saw going on in the financial system. And you could see the signs leading into what became the 2008 crisis. And this is a part of why I kind of went the direction I did into blockchain, crypto, and try and do things differently from first principles. So I founded Mpowa in 2019, after another failed startup attempt to do something in cancer. But I kind of took the ideas from that failed startup and rebooted it and started again with Mpowa. Subsequently, about a year later into the journey, I met Faisal at a crypto event, actually a talk online, and he sort of commanded me to come to South Africa. So I did that for 3 months last year, and it was an amazing trip, and learned a lot, met a lot of great people, and just put a lot more energy and inspiration into everything I'm doing. So that's a little bit of an introduction. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Elena.
Thank you, Ryan. I actually didn't know that Faisal can command you to go to South Africa. It's kind of very nice to hear. For the last few weeks that I managed to have conversations with Faisal, I can see that he is very dedicated man to Mpowa and to provide different types of services in Africa. So my main question would be at the moment, how did you come with the idea of Decarbonizer app, and what it would bring to actual to the communities and how it's different from other CO2 emissions apps around the globe.
Okay. So the the idea for what became called Decarbonizer actually was born in Amsterdam, in the Science Park, where I was. We had an office there while I was still living in Holland, and I'd been in UK for a while. In the sort of COVID lockdown time, sort of starting the company, and at that time we were still focused on energy, because that was the original founding concept of Mpowa was decentralization of energy, and actually deep tech innovation, hardware systems, and playing with some very interesting science. And that is still the long game. There's still the intention of Mpowa to work with these highly disruptive technologies, and that indeed some of our partners continuing in that space. But we, I came back from the UK to Amsterdam in the summer that year, and we basically had I had a huddle with a chap called Sergey, who is he's a design thinker, and also he's one of the people I met at YesStealth at the beginning of the project, and we all sort of had a really good rapport and a good vibe, and we've been sort of grappling around with this whole deep tech, and it's how difficult it is to actually to grapple with these inventors and crazy kind of technology that nobody believes exists and this sort of stuff. And I'd invited a former colleague I worked with at an insurance company, a chap called Jeroen Zouderhout, who's really, really strong technology guy. And I really respect his judgment. And he came and had a couple of visits with us in our office in the Science Park, and kind of deconstructed everything we were doing, and gave us a bit of a dressing down, as he does. And Sergey and I sort of looked at each other, and he's got a point there. And we sort of decided to go back to the drawing board. And Sergey's a visual artist, so he started sketching ideas, and we kind of pivoted basically and came back to the idea: why did we start this company? Look, it's all about basically addressing these scarcity issues and fundamental economic social problems in emerging markets, right? So well and good. We've got our dreams and our visions of free energy and all this crazy technology, but it's very, very difficult, and it's just going to take too long. It's going to take too much funding, and we've got to start somewhere. So we pivoted and decided to go back to developing a SaaS platform, a kind of a Kickstarter platform, working with pre-existing technology rather than trying to disrupt everything from day one and get sort of boil the ocean. So we picked a couple of simple technologies. One of those is Solvatten, which is a Swedish company that has a very good, solid, portable device that can is proven and it's safe, and they've already done a lot of projects in Africa. It's portable and it's solar powered, so kind of fits the bill as kind of a type of technology that Mpowa wants to deploy at scale, decentralized. And then we kind of crafted the sort of idea of Decarbonizer around technologies like that, basically from first principles. And it took a while, to go from idea to the design, and then iterations, a proof of concept, and now the alpha version that's just come out. Why is it different? Sorry, just to answer that point. So yeah, there are a lot of carbon offsetting projects in Web3. A lot of people saying, well, plant trees or peat or whatever sort of tokenizing some form of carbon removal or carbon offset. What's different about Mpowa is we focus on the community aspect. So we're people centric. So yes, we want to do something about climate change and carbon. We want to help remove carbon. We want to do that in a way that is economically productive to communities. So we want to create and stimulate economic activity as opposed to making life harder for people and just making a zero-sum game in terms of, greenwashing and carbon credits and this sort of thing. So we're really about helping the communities, and the carbon offset is kind of a byproduct of that, which people can buy to offset their own emissions. But we don't want to create a market in carbon credits. I think Greg's trying to say something, but he's on mute there.
Greg, you're muted.
I wanted to say I'm really glad to see you guys involving communities. I think there's a lot of power in how communities can self-organize. And so hopefully we can help, as Intercoin, we can help create the conditions and the tools for the communities to come together. I wanted to ask, first of all, what challenges have you faced building this, especially getting communities on board, but just in general, talk about that. The best will in the world. I mean, you go to a community in Africa and say, look, do you want a load of free technology and assistance? They're going to sort of pull your arms off. But there's a lot of people coming and making promises all the time. So it's credibility, it's persistence and determination, and it's being seen to be there for the right reason. You're not there to exploit people. You're genuinely there because you want to fix these problems and you want to empower them and give them the sort of the ecosystem and the tools and the training and the whatever they need, basically. So it's that it's that engagement model, which should be bottom up, and it shouldn't be done in a sort of patronizing manner, which is often I think the problem with NGOs. They just come in and it's all like, well, our way or the highway, and it's going to be like this, and people feel a bit marginalized by that. So we're trying to do things in a different way, which is we're selecting the right people, the right ethics and the right values that are consistent with what we're doing, and then we grow the impact around these kind of, we call them heroes, basically. So they're local agents that that are attached to the Mpowa platform. So we hire them basically, and then it's a kind of it's a trainer model. As we get something going in one community, then the word spreads. There's something in this. Come and take a look. They'll come and join our community, and it's word of mouth thing, really. So it's sort of it's an organic social movement, really. I think that's fantastic. That's something that we've been working on for a long time, trying to create these social movements. One of we're talking with the Forward Party about creating. You're on mute again. Yeah. Oh, am I? That's so weird that it just mute. Keeps dropping there. As things go. 1 second. Let me try to find the right window. Here we go.
And you're muted again.
I don't know why it mutes all the time. Is my screen coming through? Can you guys see it? You're good now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. So I was saying we're working with the Forward Party, and we're talking about getting an app for them. And it was started by Andrew Yang. So back 3 years ago when we first started this, we built an app for Yang 2020, which is essentially his campaign. And so all of these sub-communities can self-organize, and they were called Yang Gangs. And so you go to some of these things, and you see people just basically interested in Andrew and what they can contribute, like this guy. And so, you just basically can add them to your address book. You can keep in touch with them. All these things are possible. And so, I think building communities is the superpower that will be unlocked. Because right now, people build communities using existing tools. They use existing tools like Telegram, what we're doing now. Facebook, but the thing is, when they do that, and let's say I go to YouTube or Telegram or anything, the thing is they aggregate all their chats together. They aggregate all their videos together. So you spend all that effort trying to get people into your community. And then if your community is on one of these big centralized sites like OpenSea or YouTube or whatever, they quickly get distracted by other videos, right? On OpenSea, they get distracted by other NFTs, and of course that's essential to the site. It's intentional. They want to sell something, even if it's not your thing. So in a way, it's a bit of a zero-sum game. You pay explicitly to get people away from someone else's video and become the next suggested video after that. And they pay to get it away from you. So all these people are paying YouTube, essentially, but their videos don't necessarily convert to actual action. And I think there's going to be a movement to decentralize things away from OpenSea, away from YouTube, and get it on your own site, because on your own site, you're not going to show your competitors. You're not going to tell people go somewhere else. But then your site needs all those features in there. And I think that's the hard part. I think having the basic features that you need to have events, videos, and all that, that's the challenge that I think people have faced.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's I think what you've done is really it's a critical tool in this process, right? Because there's only so much you can do with regular channels of communication. You need something scalable that really is robust enough and can, as you say, let people kind of manage. They can organize their affairs autonomously, right? With some kind of higher level gut structure oversight. DAO sitting over the top, and that seems to be what where you're heading with the structure of Intercoin. So yeah, looks good.
Exactly. So talk about how do you see maybe Intercoin helping with all the stuff that we have developed? How do you see potentially helping your communities get together and get things done?
Yeah. So as we've kind of been through a couple of times, offline, Mpowa has a number of different vertical or themes. Like we're developing projects around gender-based violence, interventions into preventing gender violence. We're developing some software of our own, but we're also running interventions. So we want to work with organizations and, charities, people of goodwill in communities in Africa that are maybe dealing, with rehabilitation of victims of domestic abuse and gender violence. But also, we have a multi-phase strategy around this. So education, prevention, and also rehabilitation. So there's that whole part of what Mpowa is looking at. We're looking at healthcare, or let's call it, general health and health and wellness. So we wouldn't really call it healthcare per se, but prevention as a service kind of ideas. Empowering people to make better choices so they don't get ill, end up in hospital in the first place.
Exactly.
These kind of things. So we're looking at various technologies on that side. So, if you think of all the kind of like building blocks of a functioning society that's healthy, that is able to produce food in a sustainable manner, that's able to live healthy life or have the right services they need if they get in trouble medically. We're trying to put sort of, a solution and an offering for each of those kind of basic needs of a functioning society in verticals on the platform, and then spin up projects around that. So I see that each of those verticals is kind of in essence a DAO, or it's a community organized around those sort of topics. And I can see the Intercoin platform, potentially helping us to structure that and organize that in a way that it doesn't just blow up out of control, too big, too unwieldy to manage as we progress. So we've already talked about NFTs and how the funding aspect is key. That getting these things off the ground, we've got to kickstart projects. We've got to raise some money. Do that in a really robust, trusted, solid manner, so that our users and our investors and our stakeholders can have trust in how the money's being used. So again, the Intercoin infrastructure is quite mature. We're deep into evaluating, is this a good platform for us to start some projects in terms of getting some initial Kickstart NFTs marketed through the platform.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think, we've been talking about a lot of this offline. I just wanted to kind of, talk about it so people can be part of the conversation. A lot of the stuff, we later produced clips and we put it on YouTube, and you could see people interacting. Also, for everyone who's listening, if this is your first time or you're encountering this, you could go to community.intercoin.org and join the conversation. So the forum is where a lot of the people from around the world, including Patrick Friedman, grandson of Milton Friedman, who is joining us in October. All of these are hanging out here, and we're having the conversation. So I wanted to kind of bring up the NFTs and the roles in the community. So from my perspective, like NFTs and roles are pretty much the same thing, except for one difference. Like a role or a badge is something that you can do. Sorry, that was on my side. A role or an NFT is something that you can do. Is something that you can host in your account. You can show, using your wallet. But a role or a badge is something you cannot transfer to other people. It's basically, if you want to unilaterally transfer the presidency of a chess club, you probably shouldn't be able to do that. And so we have these things where you can vote, or you can have your manager manage one role, can manage another role. So I think that there's all these, there's a couple things that we've developed, and I just wanted to kind of get your take on it. One is roles, badges. You can buy your way into a DAO, let's say. Another thing is you can earn your way in by showing commitment, by doing certain things and earning reputation points. That's something you can't buy. You can't simply buy a reputation by design. And then there's also interests, and those interests are not exactly monetary. It's just people saying, look, I'd like to get, either it's interests or it's skills. And basically what you're saying is, hey, I have these skills, or I'm interested in doing this or that. And what that does is it creates reasons for people to meet each other or connect. And it also creates ways for people to get notified. Hey, I'm a developer, or I'm a community organizer, a moderator, and my services are needed, or this and that. So I think that these three things, interests by connecting people around common topics, roles that you earn, like badges that you earn for doing stuff, and NFTs that you can transfer to someone else. I just wanted to ask, like in your, how do you see it on your side, these assets being used in your ecosystem, kind of?
Yeah, so let's say a detailed target operating model, or like a governance structure for our tokenomics and our DAO is work to do yet. Right at the beginning when I started Mpowa, I had this lofty concept. I actually wrote a paper called DAO tokenomics, which is all about. It was actually inspired by Sherman Vosgier's book about DAOs. She's talking about how do you deal with this issue of on-chain, off-chain governance. Like, you can't automate everything. You need to have some human decision-making in certain aspects. And then we get into kind of political discussions and, do DAOs operate? Are they mature enough? Then you get into sociological debates. But, that's where we want to get to, because this is a human economy we're trying to model. So you got to have, some maturity in the way decisions are made. So you do need those roles. And in an ideal world, I would, want to be able to sort of model the governance structure for the ecosystem, along the lines of the Constitution of the US, because I think that's the best model we have for how to self-organize a society at scale. And you need separation of powers, and you need arbitration. You need these things holding each other in check. But you got to reach a certain scale before that's possible, because you need enough, polity and all these things, right? So that's where I want to go with it in time, to have a proper constitutional model that is self-regulating and has a treasury, its own treasury function that is monitored, democratically, and we elect a president like we do in and you have an executive branch. So basically, I'd see, Mpowa is like, what would you call it? Like we're kind of an agency of government that is working for the DAO, basically ultimately when we fully decentralize everything, but it's going to be a few years before we get to that point.
I think that's a very good goal. A lot of what we're doing is moving online. The digital asset space has moved online. I've spoken to people who want to teach a class. We have Intercoin University starting. People are going to be learning about DeFi. And so over the last few years, people have moved digital assets online, real estate titles, and so on. But now we're talking about moving governance online and votes and things like that recorded on a blockchain. So that's kind of exciting. And then maybe even taking the results of the vote and implementing that on the blockchain, like, how many tokens to issue or what to do, like on a particular. I was going to say, you reminded me, I brought up on the screen here, you could see Vitalik yesterday was talking about, with a couple people, Vitalik was saying domain names, because we're partnering, we're working with companies like Unstoppable Domains, and they're selling these domains that point to different addresses. And so the question was, like, how do you manage a domain? Should you be able to just sell it to someone else? And there were proposals that, no, you can't. The fee should go up over the years, like the fee should go up, essentially, to maintain the domain. And what's interesting is, what about stability? So a lot of the things we come to rely on, these large organizations, the bigger the movement is, the more stable it should be, right? People come to rely on it. And so if it gets sold to someone else, like an NFT, like if you sell the presidency or the whatever, it seems to be very abrupt and leaves a lot of people saying, oh, well, now it's completely different, right? The whole thing is moving abruptly in a different direction. Whereas if you have collective ownership or fractional ownership, then you have all these different stakeholders represented, maybe in a way like parliament or whatever. And then, basically you have an executive system, but it's also balanced by the voice of the different stakeholders in the project. So I find that very interesting.
Well, it's like all democratic systems, it's participatory. So, you got to, like you said, you got to earn your way in. And I think probably, my vision was that we'd have some kind of civics kind of exam, at least for people that, you really want to get involved in running things. Then at least if you understand the principles by how the system is designed, then, there'll probably be some homework to do here and there. Yeah. No,
that's exactly it. So I think voting is going to be a big part of what we're doing. The project that there's climate projects that we're involved in, and or talking to people, and it's always comes up, what are you going to do with the governance? I think in 2020. So I was friends with Michael Casey. He became the head of content of CoinDesk. Around 2020, with the elections, there was a lot of nonsense. I'm talking about, this is written before the general election in the United States. This is written like the Iowa app. Most people don't remember, but there was an app that has some centralized database, and it couldn't know the results. Like the results were delayed, by a long time. So I wrote this article about voting, how voting, I think...
It's very interesting. And
go ahead, Elena. Are you there?
He's having some signal trouble.
Probably, yeah. No, I was going to just say that I wrote this article in 2020, and back then we were saying we're going to build this. And since then, we've built it. And now we're talking about auditing it, with Circulate and other auditing companies, Consensus. But yeah, the idea is that, this is the main point. It's like for every technology we have today, there was some point at which it sucked. It wasn't a great replacement for what was already working. And even cars were, much slower than horses and so on. But now I think we're at a point where pen and paper ballots, many people are rightly afraid that if everything's under the control of one company, they can just change all the votes. And that's a real problem. And that's why the crypto space is so interesting, because you have this Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus, which people who don't know, many people have heard this already because the space has evolved, but it's essentially mutually distrusting parties checking the result. And that's exactly what we have in our elections, Democrats, Republicans in this country, in the United States, looking at a ballot and saying, okay, things were followed correctly. So that's the kind of stuff that we need, checks and balances, but we need that in the crypto space.
It's brilliant, just brilliant technology for this use case, right? I mean, couldn't be better.
Exactly.
I agree on that. But look, I mean, I think we go beyond that. I mean, probably a good 50 or 60% of what we call government today is just moving things, around aimlessly from A to B. And that's not good. That's not a healthy situation for democracy either, because you get these sort of fiefdoms and sort of entrenched special interests growing up, companies and the financial interest, which just about perpetuating the status quo, isn't it? So I think as we move forward, a lot of what is currently called government will be automated. It will be DAO'd. It will be be AI, and those jobs will get moved into more productive things. We hope, like fixing the climate emergency.
Well, yeah, that's funny. That's funny because we often associate fixing the climate emergency with actions of government. Like, in other words, we talk about actually something I want to ask you about, because
get out of the way. The free market will do it if it's set up correctly.
So that's what I want to ask about next. I find that to be very interesting. Free market mechanisms, right? How can we compare and contrast that to other mechanisms like political coercion or access? And so, a couple things I wanted to bring up. One is, before we get into climate, which I think, obviously it's important around the world. Brazil has one of the last rainforests on Earth because we've cut ours down, and now we don't want them to cut theirs down. There's also rainforests in Africa, all around that area of the Earth, that level. There's a lot of interesting ecosystems. And that's not to mention also off the coast of Australia, there are reefs, which there's hope they're coming back or whatever, but there's obviously danger, not just because of the carbon in the atmosphere, but because of the carbon in the oceans, the acidification, they said, bleaching the coral reefs, the kelp forests off the coast of California there's overfishing. So I see it as a big holistic problem of humanity in general, the number of humans on Earth that has to be fed, and so on. So I have this question, starting from a more localized thing. Factory farming. Do they have that in the UK, by the way? I don't know. They have that in the United States, where you have animals kind of brought up in crowded conditions. I think one of us is lagging. Could be me. Hello? I want to know if it's me. So can anyone chime in if you hear me?
I can hear you sound fine. He's not moving though.
Okay. Yeah, so we lost him for a moment. So I just wanted to bring up an interesting point. And what do you guys think? Should I ask him this? Factory farms. How do you use a market mechanism to get rid of factory farming? In other areas, I can think of one, but in factory farming, I've never been able to figure out how the market can solve it without some sort of directed action, some political action that is done without market signals mechanisms.
I think factory farming comes down to just basic efficiency. So until something can beat it in efficiency, or until there's like a massive, ridiculous COVID level problem with factory farming, it's not going to get changed.
Well, that's the thing. But in Europe, it was banned. or at least they just push the problem to Eastern Europe where they do the factory farming there. But
I think they might do that to Mexico. Like we've exported all our other jobs to Mexico. We might just export our food production there.
I think as long as the government is making laws, making it illegal for small farmers to do their jobs of doing small farming, I think getting the government out of our food is going to be the best way to end factory farming, because they're actually setting up a system making it illegal for small farmers to do their jobs.
Yeah. That's a good point. Easing the regulations on the small farmers, because they have to basically get comply with all these regulations. Hey, I see you're back, Ryan. Is that another account?
Yeah, sorry about that. My laptop gave up the ghost, so I've switched to my phone.
And I'm back as well.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hey, Elena. I'm going
Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you just fine.
Apologies.
Jennifer made a good point. So there's a few things, Ryan, we were talking about. I wanted to use factory farming as a localized example and ask what can we do? How can the market solve a problem? So the problem is, I've been talking about, there's a bigger problem of humans decimating. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. Humans decimating different ecosystems, or, turning them into monocultures and farms. But say that you've done that and you've turned things into monocultures and farms. There's lots of chickens, there's lots of cows, right? Brazil is doing this now. They're cutting down rainforests to have service. The beef industry is huge. Soybean industry is huge. So soybean industry is plants. But when it comes to animals, the most efficient thing in the market is to crowd them into, crowded conditions. Why build more when you can just exploit the animals, right? And then also they give them antibiotics to prevent them from, getting these diseases in crowded conditions. But as a result, they accelerate the antibiotic resistance of bacteria, which affects humans also. And you say the rise of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. My question is this: if we assume that factory farming is a problem, right? What ways can we use to? And I put this to everybody as well. What ways can we use to solve it? I see government coming in banning it, obviously, as a quick way to, maybe they've done that in mainland Europe, but that just pushes the problem somewhere else, like Eastern Europe, where they start doing it there, and they just say, "Oh, it's out of sight, out of mind." So what do you see as a market solving something like factory farming and bringing the welfare of the animals back into focus and being respected?
Okay, I was thinking that every country should produce their own food, no importing, exporting. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a big theme of Empowers is agriculture, regenerative agriculture. So there are a couple of things here, right? So first of all, have you heard of the book A Harmony of Interest, Greg?
Actually, I have not. Maybe someone else has. Tell us about it.
So Henry Carey was an economist who, let's say, was the early days of the United States when the US was setting up and basically trying to establish, continental development. And he was looking at the difference between the free trade system, which is a British Empire system, which is linked to the, the financial cancer, basically, that we're dealing with in many manifestations right now, right? We're dealing with it in medical, we're dealing with it in our food systems, we're dealing with it everywhere, sort of pollution and all these problems. So Henry Carey wrote this sort of polemic, which is all about, it was basically an attack on the British Empire system of, slavery and drugs. And so he's talking about how there are two different systems. One is an agroeconomy, which is produced locally for, without shipping stuff all over the world at, high cost, which creates, intrinsically creates conditions of slavery because it just doesn't work. So it's going back to that model. It's going back to, national economic development, where we focus on the needs of communities locally and we produce what we need locally for local needs, right? And we incentivize that kind of behavior. with the right taxation and with the right sort of economic policies to begin with. So that has to be there, because very, very hard for any we can have ideas and dreams and visions, right, as businesses that we are, but if the regulatory framework is set up contrary to what we're trying to do, it's going to be very hard. So I think there's international reform needed, like to change the structure of our financial system, to go back to that type of model, national public credits, and that's investing in building the economic infrastructure needed to support that type of economy. So on that level, but then what can we do, in our own sort of endeavors? We can focus on this regenerative agriculture type engagement, and spin up, projects and local farming and fair trade pricing, and also try to educate people. Bring people from the communities to see how the difference between farming that's done that way and animals being treated fairly and humanely and all the rest of it, versus battery farming, and try to shift the market that way. I speak for myself. I grew up not knowing any of these things. I didn't really know anything about how meat got in the supermarket till you start researching it and looking at it and kind of going, maybe that isn't so good.
Well, yeah, the regenerative agriculture and the local farming, I find that to be very interesting. I'm going to get into because you touched on something very important, the financial system. And I think the whole thing is geared towards extracting as much profit as possible from the earth and other externalities, but there's also negative externalities that you just push onto the environment. For example, you deplete the nutrients in the soil, and you got the Dust Bowl. These are real things. Right now, I find this a staggering statistic, 1/3 of all arable farmland is now undergoing what's called desertification, which is to say, it won't any longer support the kind of crops that it eats. And that to me is the kind of, why do people do this? And I think people do this because they're in a race to the bottom. We've seen this in the Great Depression. If you read books like John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath and all these things, people had overproduction on the farms, but the prices dropped, and you would think that's great, right? But what happened was, because the financial system requires these farmers to feed themselves with the
to compete in a free trade system means you're going down. So we have to turn it around and say, no, we're going to raise the prices. We're going to pay a fair price. You've got to in an economy, you've got to produce goods at a price that is above break even, meaning you don't only pay for the price of the production of the produce, but you also pay for the reproduction price. So you have to build into that price the cost of reproducing the conditions of production. So this is what's broken in our economic system at the moment. Everything's, as you say, a race to the bottom. People just want to pay the lowest price possible. And that's asset stripping everything. It's asset stripping the farmers, it's asset stripping the land, it's asset stripping the ecosystems.
So how can the market step up to address this? Because look, I am a person who, like you, thinks that the local communities can be sustainable, and we can help to do that. And that's the next topic I want to get into. But even for me, I'm very skeptical, even as a libertarian, I'm very skeptical as to how the market, just the invisible hand by itself, doesn't it always optimize towards the cheaper product, right? Doesn't it always optimize towards the factory farm, which cuts corners and crowds all of these animals into spaces and fattens them up? How do you use what essentially seems to be pushing people all the time in that direction, that system? Unless we build a completely different system that's either resource-based or something, how do you use the existing market system to end these negative externalities in and of itself? That's where I'm trying to understand. Or are you saying we should build a different system?
Parallel system, yeah. So we build back better, as it were, but from the correct principles. And I think it just comes down to utility, right? It comes down to the product that you're buying. And if you want to buy the battery chicken over there, you can see it's been injected full of water and doesn't look very healthy. Or you buy the chicken that's been running around in the wild and clearly it's got nutrients and it's like worth eating. So I think it comes back to education. We've got to get to people young enough to help them understand, like, you are what you eat. And until we can change behavior, we can't really address the market issue.
Yeah, I think the demand side definitely is one way to do it. Nancy Reagan had this campaign called "Just Say No to Drugs" or "Drugs Aren't Cool." When I was growing up, there's something on TV all the time about how drugs are bad. And I definitely got that information and was not so interested in taking cocaine and heroin. But I would say I don't know how far that can go in the holistic system, because there's lots of people who are poor and they go to McDonald's and they go to, they buy the cheap meats and whatever. And the system produces that all the time. There's another guy I interviewed, economist Thomas Greco, and we spoke about a best-selling book from the 19th century, which was called Progress and Poverty. I love discovering these new books that you're talking about. This guy, I'm going to buy his book and check it out. Progress and Poverty wasn't written by a communist. It was written by Henry George. Lots of the left-wing libertarians are Georgists. And basically he basically asked the question 100 years ago of how come there is so much progress and yet so much poverty? And his recommendation was tax the land and tax the unimproved value of the land and just have that one tax remove all other taxes, because you could see where the land is and so on. I'm not an economist. I don't I haven't delved deep into this book or this movement, but I can tell you that Georgism was very popular in its day. This was the most popular economics book of his time. And presidents, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but also Milton Friedman, also Leo Tolstoy in Russia, all liked what he had to say, which was very interesting to me. And we've lost it. I don't know anyone today. Has anyone on this call ever heard of Progress and Poverty or Henry George?
No, I can't say I have.
I actually have not.
I heard it only from you a few months ago when we had a conversation. And because we had a post on the Intercoin forum, I read actually that book.
Yeah, Henry George is an example that it's possible to have a libertarian. Oh, sorry.
So,
there was a lot.
My framework for this, I mean, I looked at a lot of different philosophies, let's say, and economic theories and paradigms and, isms. And I kind of settled on, because I lived in the US for 4 years in New York and studied, I kind of came across some things there and learned, did my schooling on the Constitution and the, national public credit system and, national banking versus central banking, let's say. So I veered towards what is actually formally called the American system of political economy. And it is an explicitly anti-free trade system that is all about, fair trade and economic productivity. And I think the yardstick we have to use to measure economic progress is not monetary, it's physical. So you have to look at how the economy is behaving physically. And there is one unit of measure you can use to actually scientifically say, is the economy growing or not? And that is the energy flux density in a particular land area actually increasing or decreasing? So ignore all financial monetary measures and just measure, are we actually producing and consuming more energy per unit of square land or decreasing? If that measure is increasing, we're actually growing as an economy, and you're becoming more productive and doing less work to create more output.
That's interesting. For some reason, when I think of energy flux density, I think of some kind of electromagnetic fields or quantum mechanics or something. Can you talk about
it's flow.
Energy flow?
Yeah. So if you say if you divide the area of the United States into into squares, 1 kilometer wide, and you just physically measure how much energy is being produced and consumed in that space.
So how do you measure that? Because obviously the sun is hitting every part of the earth equally there, and then some parts are desert. Like I was in Arizona, Nevada, right, and Las Vegas. I was flying over desert like for hours, and I woke up and it's still desert. So that versus trees.
Yeah. I don't mean like sunlight. I mean electricity. So power. How much power are we actually? How much power is the economy consuming, and where? And what's the intensity map of that power use?
Until the 20th century, a lot of that power just came from plants converting sunlight into chlorophyll or ATP through ATP, or they stored it in their carbon. Essentially, plants came out of the air. It's awesome stuff by Richard Feynman. Talks about how plants come out of the air, and when you burn the plant, you burn the tree, it releases the energy back. The O2 is typically the byproduct, the oxygen, and then when you need oxygen for fire, that's because it comes back. And there's nuclear fusion, I guess, not nuclear fusion, but the atoms come together to form a more complex molecule of CO2. So I think that most of the wheat and rice and other things that are grown around the earth is because of the energy density, right? It's in other words, it just gives you more calories. And it can feed people. And so people decided to grow these things, right? Is that basically how it came to be? Or
yeah, I think it's the tendency of life and cognitive life to aggregate things and, to create innovations and efficiencies in how we're, interacting with the physical universe. We have this ability as humans to discover scientific principles and employ them to improve the conditions of life, to give us more power, physical power over our surroundings, right? That's the physical force of human evolution that we're talking about, and it's easiest to measure that in terms of energy flux. I think that's the platform upshift that I would like to see as Mpowa, how we move from an economy that's thinking in terms of money to one that's thinking in terms of physical impact of the money we put in should have a net increase in energy flux density in any project that we do.
So have you ever heard of
that's the basis of Mpowa Coin when it comes, later. That's how I'm going to design the tokenomics of it. How we get the data for that, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
That's what I want to talk about. So that's the next thing I want to talk about. Globally, we are, transforming our environment one way or the other. I saw really cool things like a city that's called The Line. They're going to build in the Saudi desert or one of the deserts. So we have that. And then I remember this guy. He was quite a nice, charismatic, funny guy, engineer. He kept talking about the Venus Project. Have you heard of James? I think his name is Franco. Right? Am I getting his name right? I forgot his name, to be honest. He was like 80 years old, 90 years old. Like I love these guys, like Noam Chomsky, Thomas Greco. Like a lot of these guys are 90 years old. And to the end of their life, they were talking. This guy might have been 102. He's talking about the future and what we could do. So these cities, these circular cities, is something he always envisioned. I don't know. Have you heard of the Venus Project?
Yeah, I have. I think one of my co-founder at the beginning of Mpowa was into all that stuff. So yeah, we did discuss this a few times. Yeah.
So what do you think of having a resource-based economy? Can you talk about what that means, and is that something related to what Mpowa is trying to bring about?
Yeah, I mean, we want to have an economy that that prices in the social impact of what we're doing, right? So it's not just a zero-sum game. It's not just a cumulative exercise in extracting monetary value. So we want to create an incentive system that where the currency itself values, as I said, increase in physical activity as measured in terms of energy throughput, and also, penalizes, let's say, environmentally destructive behavior. So, so that's where the monitoring aspect comes in, and we want to be able to track and trace and test the things that we say we're doing in terms of projects and community growth that are actually happening, and we have the metrics and the framework to prove that. So it's part incentives, and it's part it's good cop bad cop sort of thing. Well, if you don't deliver on the sort of commitments you give around getting certain funding or certain technology through the platform, then it will get harder to get funding in the future, basically.
Basically, Ryan, you just described the project called Your Justice, and it's our next speaker in 2 weeks' time. They are coming on our event. Exactly what you described, it's already created, and we are planning to help them with smart contracts for their platform as well. So I would be happy to introduce you. It's a lady, co-founder of this project, actually, in UK.
We all need to link arms. We're all kind of on the same journey here.
Exactly.
It's about synergy and collaboration, and
yes, and
each other.
Like you mentioned yesterday when we talked, that one of our previous speakers on Intercoin show, one of your close friends. That's the reason why we are all together, because we have the unity in our vision for the future, for the humanity. And that's what we are doing with the Intercoin and with the unblockers.
There's no choice. We can't continue as we are. The systems we're living in are collapsing. They're broken. And we have to get off that system. It's life and death thing. It's not a science project. It's survival of the planet. And also, it's, for me personally, it's a matter of being able to look myself in the mirror. 30 years from now, if I make it that long, what did you do about it? We got into that situation as a civilization. So how do we get ourselves out of it? And that's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of collaboration, and a lot of goodwill.
I think that in small pockets of the world, we could do experiments on how to exit from the current system and try other things. One interesting city that I've discovered that has no money. It's not Chaz in Portland, Oregon. It's actually a city called Oro in India, and it has no politics, no money, and no religion. It's just people self-organizing different things and collectively governing themselves.
Sounds like a utopia almost.
Yeah, exactly. And they've made it work over there. I'm not saying that maybe the whole world can do it. I'm just saying it seems to work. Different systems seem to work. But to wait for these systems to work and to prove themselves and to be adopted around the whole world, to me, is, there's things that are happening right now that we're going to lose a lot of species in the next 20 years. We're going to have species go extinct. The kelp forests, the butterflies, and the pollinators like the bees. We need to make sure that the ecosystems stay intact, just even for the food supply, let alone biodiversity. So to me, it's an urgent problem, and these experiments are cool. But we need to, I think, change the actual financial incentives. And the current financial incentives we have is, hey, rape the planet as much as possible because you get the most benefit. Now, to be fair, farmers definitely have regenerative practices now, and there's movements to improve that. But I feel that despite the financial, that's always, trying to prevent the financial system from completely destroying the environment, having at least some standards for the animal welfare or for the soil, the bacteria, and the nutrients. So the financial system, to me, and the number of humans on the planet are the two big causes, inputs, of why things change now versus 200 years ago, where I think things were much more sustainable. If you look at the United States, you look at some of these things, the majority is still green. There's a lot of trees. No one lives there. Like, the cities are actually taking up a small part. Even the farms are taking up a small part. But having said that, we had forests. Europe had a lot of forests, right? Britain had a lot of forests. I mean, now it's just lawns, and I've been to the Hampstead Heath. It's cool, but it's not like, Central Park in New York is like
Yellowstone.
Exactly. It's like a small oasis in a sea of, what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, the US is huge. I mean, and it's mostly being rewilded, you know that? So it's all, it's all going back, it's being rewilded back to nature and all this, Agenda 2030 stuff. But I don't personally think that's the way that we're going to solve these issues. I think you need to fix the problems in the way we think as a society, the way we think about economy and land and productivity and these things. It's about education fundamentally. That's what I believe. And if we can create a movement and enough sort of like motion in the right direction with the right policies, the right projects, which we can showcase this is how you can do it. Then then that's how you shift the culture, isn't it? In all periods in history where a set of wrong ideas is taking us in the wrong direction, you have to create a renaissance of thinking and shift it in the right direction. And that's what Web3 and blockchain is to me. It's a bit of a renaissance movement. It's disruptive. It's introducing old new ideas. It's really bringing back what worked, because the current system is so broken, right? That we can't operate in it. So you have to kind of operate outside it in a way.
So when we have the second season of the Intercoin show, I'm going to start booking people on panels. So everyone's that come on to the show, like Noam Chomsky, I have interviewed independently, Thomas Gregg independently. Stacey Rutland is the leader of the basic income movement. Is one of the, I should say, there's many different organizations for universal basic income. She's one of the organizations called Basic Income because they're working with another organization called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. And they have tons of mayors around the United States. And basically, the way she explained it, I had a conversation with her literally yesterday. It was about, universal basic income is tough, and maybe that's the goal eventually, but we're looking for at least a guaranteed income, which is means tested and only for people who make below a certain amount. But she was skeptical, and I told her we could have a universal income for a city if we pay in the city's own currency. The city must have its own monetary system that's complementary. It doesn't replace the dollar. It's something that can help people buy local, shop local, and hire local. And she gets it, but she's still skeptical to the point where she gets the guaranteed income very much, and she knows all these mayors, and we can have introductions to the mayors, which is great. Intercoin needs those connections, right? And but we would have to do it their way, the way of these mayors, which is not universal basic income. It is guaranteed basic income. It's paid out in dollars. It's using their current financial system. They can pay down their credit cards with this. And what I was telling her is, look, we got to have a longer conversation, obviously. We agree on many things, and this is the one remaining thing. Should you have local currencies? Because she was saying, well, local currency, you cannot spend on many things and that you would need. And I was saying, well, the things that you would spend on, people throughout history spent local. They weren't going 300 miles a day in 30 miles a day and commuting every day. That's a new thing. So they had local cows, local butchers, local plant, everything. So here's my point. Of course, we have global supply chains, but for us to have local, we need local community currencies issued by the community and taxed back by the community. What we currently have is money supply issued by banks, often national banks or global banks like HSBC. And what happens there is they give you a credit card or they give a loan to a business. And I'm starting to understand this over the years because my work brings me into contact with this. The banks originate the credit money, And then when you pay it back, they're the source and the sink of the money. So the money gets paid back. The banks owe each other the money, but the money is a global money supply. And so what happens is, if you have a local economy, some banks, even like Goldman Sachs, can corner the market in whatever it is that thing does. And a multinational corporation like Nestle can buy the lakes and dry up the lake in a local economy. So a lot of the problems really come from the fact that a local economy cannot support a global demand and not many humans. But that's what they do. They go here and they exhaust the resources here. And then they go to this other thing and exhaust the resources there. And it's like the local community sells out because they need jobs or they need money in the global financial system, where they could have been serving each other and living in a sustainable way if they started to be increasingly disconnected from the global system and relying more and more on what they used to rely on, which is how Native Americans live and others, which is to say, locally being self-sufficient. And if you're locally self-sufficient, then you no longer need jobs that then you rape your land to serve these other people that have more money than you. So I think the financial system is really, the number of humans in the financial system is really the kind of the base thing that we need to fix in order to even have sustainability. Because you could have sustainability in some little parts. You could have sustainably grown lettuce and humanely raised chicken, and that's great. And some people will use it. But there's going to be a lot of poor people around the United States who just go to KFC and they're just going to get whatever chicken was raised however. And I think unless you eliminate that, unless you reduce that, you're just going to get these supply chains that rape the planet, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a big debate, which we don't have time for today, I'm afraid. But I get where you're going. I'd love to have more time to discuss these big subjects with you. I've got to run actually to my management meeting now, so
okay,
I'm gonna have to drop off, I'm afraid. But I really want to thank you again for the opportunity. It's been a great conversation. Nice to meet the Intercoin community as well.
Yeah, thank you very much
for coming.
Thank you very much for coming on. And later we hope that we could have a conversation with more people, economists together. So bring you on.
Yeah, be a good debate. All the best. Thanks again, Elena. Thanks, Greg. All the best. Bye.
Bye.
Absolutely. So what do you all think? I want to bring it up to everybody. Let's have a conversation. I mean, is the financial system something that needs to be reformed in order for us to make any meaningful change in the environment? Or is there something that we can do within the current market system and banks issuing the money and all that kind of stuff? Like, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think it's a lot of hurdles to jump through with the current financial system.
Yeah.
You mean like the way? Go ahead.
I'm thinking about traveling. How would it work if we had community currencies? If people wanted to travel, how would that work?
Tarina, we'd love to hear you, but you need to get closer to the mic or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Oh, much.
Not yet. Is it much better? Okay.
Way better.
There you go. I was trying to talk. I was wondering why you weren't hearing me. Sorry. So I was saying, if we had community currencies, how would it work? How would it affect traveling?
If we had community currencies, we'd have an alternative. It wouldn't replace fiat money overnight. In fact, it might never replace fiat money. But what it would do is it would allow people to have a way of controlling their own monetary policy. So if you look at the federal monetary policy that we have in the United States and Canada and other places, you have something very interesting. For example, the central bank essentially controls how much money can be printed. And so let's look at the Federal Reserve, zero reserve requirements. Okay, so here's the board of the Federal Reserve itself. This is what they say. Normally, historically, banks had to keep reserves. Now, they kept them in gold until we got off the gold standard. Or I should even say, even before that, already people, there was an act of confiscating gold at some point before that. Regardless, the point is that the banks used to keep reserves. And after we got off the gold standard, they would keep 10% on reserve, usually, reserve requirements. And if a bank got into trouble, then the federal government would help out with as a lender of last resort to those banks. And that's what happened in 2008 and so on. But then look at what happens now. As announced on March 15th, 2020, which is after the pandemic, the board reduced reserve requirement ratios to what? To 0%, effective March 26th. This action eliminated reserve requirements for all depository institutions. Not many people talk about this. Many people talk about the federal government printing money. But actually, your money supply doesn't come primarily from the federal government. Our money supply comes from banks with underwriters deciding to give this or that consumer a credit card or to give this or that business a loan. And they do that based on models that they have, trying to predict what will happen in 5 or 6 years. Of course, tons of times they're wrong. Tons of times they end up funding bubbles. And here's the thing. These bubbles are usually in some sort of thing which you can buy across state lines, not local. You don't see a local bubble in, food. You don't see a local bubble in haircuts. What typically happens is you have a bubble. Like, what did most people spend their $1,400 check on, $2,000 check? Many of them the poor people have a bigger marginal propensity to consume. It means they spend more of their stimulus check, but they spend it on things they need, like food. The people who had money in the bank, let's say you have $30,000 saved up, and now you're getting $1,400. You may say, it's time for a vacation, or let's go buy these stocks because trillions of dollars printed, dollar is going to go down. That actually hasn't really happened. The dollar strengthened for other reasons globally, but people want to buy stocks on Robinhood. People want to buy cryptos, and it's become easier and easier, and you have these exchanges that let people buy these things. But of course, there's a zero-sum game. For someone to make money, let's say you invest $100, you get $200. Somebody else has to lose money because the money isn't being printed by the exchanges. It's not being printed by Robinhood. It's coming out. It's coming in, it's coming out. But the money supply is being printed by the banks. And so essentially that money supply that you saw, you could probably see for yourself how many people you know who spent the $1,400 stimulus check, they put it right into crypto, right? The $1,400 was the biggest check size, the mode, it's called, the statistical mode. It's the most common check size that was set to Robinhood or to Binance. So people are just putting their money in. The difference is with local currencies is this. With local currencies, you hire local and you can spend local. You can't spend the local currency outside. So when we have a Vegas coin, we're talking about making Vegas coin with the great folks on the ground of the Forward Party, Cesar Marquez. I'm going to have him on the show probably talking about how they're building stuff in Nevada. So they have a political party, Forward Party, and this is something they can get behind. Some of the people love local currencies. So the way local economies work is that the money you get is you spend locally. And how locally? Well, it's all self-selecting. If I have a local casino chip in Vegas, people around the casino and around the hotel will gladly take it. The further away from the hotel I go, the less they're likely to take it because it's more of a hassle to go and redeem it. But as long as it's usable somewhere in something and you can redeem it once a week or whatever, it's libertarian, it's self-selecting, which means you don't need a armed guard to prevent people from moving these chips out of the casino. People just will naturally move just as much as they need, but they won't take $1 million in chips and take it back to New York because it's worthless. It's almost worthless. You won't be able to buy any pizza in New York with this stuff. So what Intercoin does in the first phase is it just helps local communities create their own currency. And we've been working on it, and now we're at the point where we're auditing the smart contracts, and we're getting grants, and we're getting investment into going to market in the small communities around the world. Once we have these communities, though, we're going to integrate all of these into one network called Intercoin, and then these communities can set their own policy. If they see too much money escaping the community, they'll put tariffs. They'll say, okay, 10% you lose, or 20%. And this is what crypto projects do. They call it taxes. When you sell SafeMoon, you lose 10%. We're just basically saying, forget SafeMoon. We want to have utility. You're on board a cruise ship. You want to be able to spend it on board, literally on board the cruise ship. If you're in a town, the businesses need to start accepting the currency. Is it going to be used for everything? No. But it will be used, hopefully, for enough things that if you give it to the poor people, the homeless people can get this on their phone. Then they'll be able to eat. So anytime you see a homeless person asking you for money, you just say, you already have money. Give them the app, and then they won't have to beg anymore. They'll just go and get the food every day. That's what we're talking about.
Very good. Very good. Okay, now you answered my question. Thank you.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
You answered my question, so thank you. And I think it's a brilliant idea. Very good.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. So yeah, Jeremiah, you've been kind of quiet today. And Shia, welcome, by the way. It's been a while. How's it going?
Yeah, only because I don't know if my Wi-Fi is working good, and I don't want to be sounding wonky.
Oh, you're good, man. Today you're good.
Okay. Now, I think the whole subject of what, has been talked about here today is definitely right on point, especially from, like you say, a local standpoint. I think we need to really start kind of hunkering down around local communities, because I believe we're going to gain far more value from people, knowing people and working with the people in their communities versus, all of this stuff where, you can work with anybody anywhere. I don't think it's bad. I just think that overall right now, because of the system that has been, how would you put it? The system that has been manipulated, through nepotism and cronyism and all of the other isms, it has really taken advantage of the smaller audience people, where if we knew one another, kind of like the way the Constitution works, people know, back in the day when Benjamin Franklin and them were putting this all in place, people knew people in the local community. You know what I'm saying? 18,000 or 20,000 people showed up for Benjamin Franklin's funeral, because of the fact that they knew him, in the local community. And so I think this is one of the things that he kind of saw when he, before he agreed to put his blessing on the Constitution, is that he foresaw that people would have the ability to manipulate stuff, and he knew human behavior really, really well. So yeah, I think with those things in mind, he decided to sign it because they asked him for his blessing, and he said, well, while it isn't perfect, he said, it is good enough, for us to move forward on. And I think that, again, like I said, I think that all of his apprehension probably was in seeing, these things manipulated beyond the broader surface. And if we look deeply into, and I use Franklin because he's kind of like my historic mentor. I've done a lot of studying on him, but everything that we know in terms of like the American, economic system was pretty much invented by Franklin. The libraries, the hospitals, the post office, the fire department, and all of the, streets and sanitation, and all the stuff that, you would consider local for a community to really have, because if you don't have a local fire department, what good is a fire department 3 suburbs over from you? So again, Franklin put all of these things in, and they were more local. Even the junta, which was nothing but a group of business men in the community who talked about, If their business was successful, here's what worked. If their business failed, here's why it failed. And they traded ideas, just like we're doing right now, through the Intercoin community. We are having an opportunity to talk about issues and problems and come to solutions, as well as network and build our own relationships locally. Even though we might sometimes be using people, who are in other countries, they're still, to me, kind of like a local community where we know each other. Like, Ilana knows these people in the UK, and I trust Ilana. You know what I'm saying? So because I trust her, I know she's bringing good people to the table. And likewise, if I bring somebody to the table, or Tyler brings somebody to the table, or Shaya brings somebody to the table, they know these people. And so because of that, the people have already been vetted. And that means that when they come into our community, it's almost kind of like when you meet somebody and you introduce somebody to a friend, they're skin in the game, because, if they act up and they're disrespectful to the friend you introduce them to, who's going to help you with your plumbing today, you're going to know about it. And I think that those are the things that, to me, why local communities, and even thinking in terms of local communities, in a global way, makes it so much better for us. And that's how I feel about it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. When you were talking about it, I thought of 4 things I wanted to say. One is the reputation, right? What you're talking about, your reputation for being a good person. When you're in a local community and you grow up there, everyone knows you. And like when the time for you to get married, everybody knows pretty much who this person is. These books, about Charlotte Bronte, all these sisters, they wrote books about how a man comes to town, everybody knows about it as a new person. But that's what it used to be. And it broke down now because, let's say, even the vendors for the tourists, right? If they cheat you or they do something, the reputation doesn't really carry. There's a big lag because like people leave the town, who are they going to tell? So it takes a while. When people go to a new town to get a new reputation. And this is the second thing is even human relationships like dating. A lot of guys, Tyler, you might be interested in this. So people are afraid, men are afraid to approach women that they might be interested in. And I like to look at the fundamentals. Why is that? Why are men afraid to approach women? You would think, what's the big deal? They just get a rejection. Well, turns out throughout history, it was very dangerous to approach women. Just in a village, when things happened in a community, everyone kind of knew about things, right? There was no phone. The invention of the phone, the invention of technology, and that's the third thing, caused that you can do a pinpoint, you could just reach that one person. So what that means is, let's say before the phone, you'd have to get to know everyone in the village. The gentleman caller was a person who came over, he called on you, and he spent time, and the lady got dressed, the girl got dressed, and then they went out, and everybody knew you would have to talk to the parents. Then the phone came out, and you can call someone on the phone, give them a call, but it was no longer a call in the sense of showing up. It was a call in the sense of getting a call. So now, however, they had party lines, so everyone knew everyone's business. Then it was that in my time, there was no cell phones when I was growing up, like a kid. So you had to get to know the parents. And if the parents didn't like you, right, they would say, like, I mean, I never got this, but I'm sure other people got like, oh, I'm sorry, she's out right now. Right? So what happens is that then after the phones, we got cell phones. And they were little feature phones, so you had to type the little texting. But you got a phones, first of all, you could call somebody, so texting was hard. But now you could call the girl directly, which meant that you didn't have to talk to her parents anymore. You didn't have to talk to her village. No one had to know. The girl could be from the Bronx, and you could be from Brooklyn. The reason people are afraid to strike up these conversations, one major reason, is because the dynamics still retain, throughout history where you couldn't just talk to someone just like that. The very idea that you could is because you can follow up with the phone. People don't realize how much technology plays a role. And finally, we got texting. So you no longer even have to call anyone. You literally can mass text. I know like a couple guys who literally just meet people and they just mass text, like marketing. Boom, 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 and then they meet up. And then you don't even have to text. You just use emojis. It's like getting more and more and more crazy. I don't know. So my point is, when you have a community like Detroit, Motor City, and money's coming in, it trickles down and spills over. The workers go to the bars, whatever. But the technology makes it so that now robots are getting the money. So money comes in and it comes out immediately to the shareholders because the robots are doing all the work. And so you no longer have a community of money spilling in. You can pinpoint the money to the factory, Tesla's Gigafactory, whatever. The robots do the work. The robots are owned by the shareholders, the corporation. And the local people never get to see any of it. It's the same for dating, and it's the same for paying for cars. That's what technology seems to do, isolate us into these like things. And you can pinpoint, talk to 2 or 3 guys by the whole lake, and the rest of the people don't see anything from that. That's what we have to change, in my opinion, because like technology is great, but it allows this global community to exploit one another in these ways that previously were impossible. Because in order to get in there, you had to build a reputation and you had to help the community before they would let you do anything. And now you could have one guy on the blockchain own the lake, and then you could just buy it from that guy, and he could corrupt that one guy. And now suddenly the whole community suffers. So I think it's very important to bring back this sense of reputation, community, local currency that you have to amass before you can go ahead and corner the market in bread in a local community, or buy up the lake if you're Nestle, like, and dry up the lake. Like, that's the problem that we have. And until we bring back this sense of community and investing in each other in local currencies, I think we're going to see more and more of this exploitation of people, animals, also of communities, where 1 or 2 people win and the rest of the community is no better off at all. Jeremiah, does that ring true with you, or like?
Brother, you're right. You're right on point. Matter of fact, it made me think of when America was dealing with retaliating against Britain, but they had no resources. And so Franklin had to go to France and, develop relationships with the very, aristocratic French and, the very affluent community there. And they loved Franklin. But again, they loved him because he was able to, just be really local, be like, one of the family, so to speak. And his reputation, preceded him. Even though he was in America, by the time he got to France, he was known, even though there was no internet, there was no telephone, everything was passing, by ship on the ocean. And I mean, that took months sometimes for things to get where it went. But still, the ideal thing that you brought up, point number 1, reputation. I think that's a real crucial piece, to where we need to go in the future is, our reputation precedes us. There's an old biblical saying that, that a good name, that a person's good name precedes them, and that, it opens doors for them, because of that good name. So there used to be a time when your name, just your name alone, carried so much weight that it made all the difference in the world. Matter of fact, it was one of the most pivotal things that I remember my father saying when him and my mom went through a divorce, and I was like 15. And my dad said, son, always protect your name. Always, do a good job, because your name is the only thing that you really get to take forward, with you into the future. And if you've left a good past with your name, then your name will proceed forward into the future with no problems. And in a world where, technology and all of that and relationship building and people, it's like, even if we think about some of the stuff that has happened recently, with cryptocurrency and people getting hoodwinked, that couldn't happen in a local community. You know what I mean? Because the reputation part, was so, would be so crucial, that, people would tell you right up front, well, I don't think you should deal with that person because, they don't have a good reputation. So I think
you're right.
Like I said, I think you're solid and right on point with what you shared.
I want to end with one last thing and get anyone who wants to discuss it. Basically, when you don't have local community, the opposite is when you have you have a global big firepower, fire hose. Like, let's say you're marauders and you see this village, a local village, right? It has some police and it's able to repel some small attacks. But what you could do is rent this army, right? This army that will go ahead and plunder the village. And then everyone recoups, like they get in more, they plundered, so they get more than they put in. And so it's almost like cost effective to do this. And so the communities band together into this large like commonwealth that prevents marauders of larger and larger size. And they have rules. So I think rules are good. Federations are good. But sometimes they start to issue their own money and they start to sort of make these big federal things that suddenly start to exploit local communities that previously they weren't able to. So I wanted to play this. You reminded me of Clinton. This was his debate. Many people here probably weren't born when this happened. I don't know if you're young, but Hillary was his wife. Bill Clinton, this is what he said in his debates when he won the presidency. He was talking about economics. This is what he said against George regular Bush. Oh my goodness. Made so many mistakes. Here we go. Here's Clinton and what he says about economics back then. Take a listen.
That's why I'm trying to.
So they were asking, what can you do to
do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education systems? Thank you. Glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who've lost jobs, lost their homes. Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the president sign laws that make us do more things and gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this ever since October with people like you all over America, people that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from first to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American healthcare costs, and bring the American people together again. And then we're making 10 years.
So I happen to completely agree. This guy's facial reaction when Clinton was talking about it, he's like, oh my God, I think I'm going to lose this debate. But I happen to see, maybe I have a different approach than Clinton. Maybe I, work fair and all these things that he did. But I think that investing in our people happens on a local level. And notice what he talks about. I know the people. I know the businesses that went bankrupt. That's what it's all about.
Spot on. Totally agree. And that makes all the difference when you have those kinds of connections. That's what brought me to Intercoin, was a relationship. And great relationships, will continue to bring you into things that you wouldn't have the ability to get into because nobody knows you. So I think, like you said, you're so spot on. And Intercoin to me is so ahead of the game, but at the same time still spot on. Because you need to start building the infrastructure, what you're talking about with this organization right now. And it can only be when people believe in that particular dream. That's why, like I said, that's why I'm still here, regardless of, what other people decided to do. I said, no, I believe in the dream, man. And when you believe in the dream, it's not about, sometimes it's not about the people, that brought you to the dance, but it's about what's going on at the dance. When you get there, that's what makes you stay. If the music is good, if the food is good, if the people that are there, are good, you're like, man, let's party all night.
Exactly. I hope to not disappoint you. Our developer team is putting together some stuff we're going to be putting out. And yeah, man, it's all about showing up every week. Our community is where it all begins. And like I told you, man, I said, I'd rather have everyone here bring one person to the next week's call, right? And to the forum. Because if we did that, and then that one person, after a few weeks, started bringing one person a week, we don't need to do crazy marketing. Because everyone who comes in, they're either going to get it, or they're going to get it after a while, or they're going to be, it's not for me. But that's the kind of people we want. We don't want shilling. We don't want people to just come in and be like, oh my God, this thing is going to the moon. Oh, this is going to be, the biggest next Ponzi scheme. No, like we're actually taking our time. We're not going anywhere. We're, bear market, not bear market. Like we are going to build this. So
absolutely. Matter of fact, the young lady who was here a little earlier, she's left now, but Jennifer, she comes back every week. I got here today late, a few minutes late, but I sent her a text. And I said, hey, I haven't been able to let you know, but, she said, yeah, Intercoin show is today. She said, I'll be there. And as soon as I came on, a few minutes later, she showed up and she even, contributed today. And this is a woman who, when she first started coming to the Intercoin meetings, to the shows, she was like, Jeremiah, I really don't know if I fit in. I don't know what's going on here. They're talking about crypto, and I really don't know much about it. And I said, Jennifer, just stay here and just keep listening. I said, at some particular point in time, there's going to be something you can chime in on, and it's going to take you, a few weeks, maybe a few months before, you start seeing how what is being said here applies to you personally. And one of the things that she quickly began to get is, the day that one of my other friends came to the show and they both got a chance to talk, is that we're talking about everyday life here. We're not, crypto might come up, but what I think you've kind of put in place for people is to understand that if we aren't building utility, if we aren't building really, in a sense, if we aren't building community, you know what I'm saying, with what we're doing here, to me, that's what utility is. It's community. It's people knowing people, it's relationships, you know what I'm saying, that bring value. You add value through relationships. That's why, like I said, utility can be having a good name. You know what I'm saying? That's what we call in the marketplace goodwill. You know what I'm saying? The fact that your name has preceded 50 years and it still has a reputation where, hey, when you go and buy baking soda, you buy Arm & Hammer. You know what I'm saying? That's, to me, that's utility. You know what I'm saying? In a way in which maybe everyday people can't sometimes see the value of that. But again, my point is that here it is, last minute, I send her a text, she comes and she shows up. That's utility. That's relationship, that's community, and that's what we need to do. That'll build whatever we're doing right now, one person at a time. After a while, we'll have so many people here, that we won't have time for everybody to, pitch in and share.
100%, man. Very well said. I see some new faces. By the way, Tyler, tell me your journey. Like, you've been with us for a few months now. How has it been for you?
I related a lot to what Jeremiah said. It's like it's kind of along the same circumstance. Like, even the person that brought me in, they might not necessarily still be here, but I see the vision and I have love.
By the way, just to update, I talked to them and they're coming in. They're putting in another. I'm not going to tell you the amount, but
yeah, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. But yeah, I don't know. I just kind of related to that. Just hearing Jeremiah say that I really felt that. I see the vision. I love the company, and it is really about community, making stuff work like that.
Cool, man. So yeah, if anyone else wants to chime in, I see Olamide here. Shaya, you're always welcome. If you wanted to say a few words. And what about Shaya? You have an interesting experience actually from another country, like getting to know the movement. And if you want to say anything, what was from your impressions, like initial impressions, and what do you think now, about Intercoin? I don't mean to put you on the spot like that. I don't know if he's even here, but it says listening. Olamide, am I pronouncing your name right? Olamide Akinde? Well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot. Besides, I think we had a great conversation today. I encourage everybody, who's here, and all the new faces and everyone who hasn't done this yet, definitely go to community.intercoin.org, right? If we've learned anything today, it's that community is where all the value originates from. So if you want to participate in the discussion, or you just want to set an alert for next week, we're going to get Patrick Friedman, son of Milton Friedman and founder of the Seasteading Institute with Peter Thiel, others. We're going to talk to him about libertarian economics and politics. We're going to have Stacy Rutland, who is talking about the basic income movement and the mayors for guaranteed income. So those are people that you can look forward to. There's a bunch of others, which I'll tell you later. And as for the roadmap, I'll just end with this. The roadmap, if you go to intercoin.org now, I've updated the roadmap. I have to make an article about this. So for the longest time, we've been under promising and over delivering on things other than the Intercoin app. So people have been saying, where's the Intercoin app? Where's the Intercoin app? Well, a lot of things go into the Intercoin app. Intercoin app will eventually help you do 12 different things. We have 12 smart contracts that we've built. So I've gone through the roadmap and I've filled in all the stuff we've already done. And now if you go to 2020 in March, or you go to April, August, December, once you get to all these things are links. You could go read it. January 2022, this year, we released the audited NFT smart contract. We released a multi-sig control contract. We started work on a cross-chain swap for New Genesis, which Elena helped us do. This is March of this year. April, escrow contract, help people pay off-chain. All of these things we were doing, we weren't really telling people because I guess it doesn't occur to me, but if you go read about it, all these things for a smart contract for contests, right? All these things, like you click and it's going to take you to the article and you can discuss anything you want. Communities holding a contest. That's something that's going to be very important. Well, guess what? We've built it. We're talking right now to CertiK and others to audit these smart contracts. So I should have been putting this out more clearly, what we've been doing throughout the year, but it's not like we've just been working on the app. All of these things have been documented. And soon you're going to have an easy to use dashboard. You can create your own contests and your own things. So this week we're putting some of these on the blockchain, and I'll make a article to show you and announce these contracts as they come out. So where are we now? July 2022. Okay, September. Contract for raising money with group deals. So I decided let's put the Intercoin app launch in October. And it's probably going to be ready earlier. We're probably going to have a beta test, but that's what you can expect. So going forward on this roadmap, what you don't see is the interviews, the partnerships, the things that we're going to announce. We're going to announce some partnerships soon. But what you see is what we've done and what we're going to do. So with that, I hope if everyone's excited and want to follow the stuff, just go to the forum, sign up, follow the topics that you're interested in, economics, whatever, and hopefully become part of the movement. So that's it for Intercoin Show today. We're going to announce the next interviews, next partnerships. Season 2 of the show is going to feature all the people from Season 1, but we're going to bring them together. We're going to have an economist with a person who talks about sustainability, with a political scientist, and we're going to discuss how can crypto help solve these things. So this has been a very exciting season of Intercoin Show. I think after October, we're going to start preparing for the next season. So thank you again to everybody for joining, and we'll see you probably next week.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.